to a much needed vacation and me getting sick immediately after that vacation, I didn't have much time to jump into the fully released version of Sons of the Forest right away. So for that reason, my review is coming a little late. But with it being a horror game, it didn't feel right to pass this game up and miss out on giving you guys my honest opinion of Sons of the Forest. Full disclosure, I didn't play this game at early access as I tend to hold off on full releases before I give a game a shot. And I also never played the original Forest game. This was a completely new experience for me, and this review will come from a fresh perspective. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerd Space Games, and this is my review of Sons of the Forest. Let's get it. Sons of the Forest is a survival game first that puts you on an isolated island with plenty of unique landscapes, terrifying monsters, cannibals that roam around the island, limited resources, and much more. Even though it's a survival horror game, Sons of the Forest isn't your typical experience in this genre as it leans more into the survival elements. After crash landing in one of the randomly designated starting points on the island, the player is immediately thrown into this massive open world where they'll need to stockpile resources. Food, water, medicine, and other essentials are scattered throughout the world that'll help you stay healthy and strong so that when that first cannibal comes looking for its dinner, you'll be ready for them. Because of your condition after crash landing, your first priority is to gather enough medicine, food, and water to help you get through the first few days. Over time, you'll start to notice that the island will continue to get more and more dangerous, especially at night. More cannibals, stronger monsters, and so on will start to invade your safe space if you don't find a way to protect yourself. Which leads to probably the most exciting part of Sons of the Forest: building a home base. This is where Sons of the Forest truly shines, as it's basically Minecraft meets horror. With a very exciting and easy to learn construction system, Sons of the Forest allows you to get very creative with designing your own cabin in the woods. You can build defensive walls that'll protect your property from invaders and even lay traps out and around the area to help add additional security. From there, you can build your own cabin. Walls, windows, doors, multiple floors, tree houses, lookouts, and so on. Whatever you can think of within reason, you can build. And for those of you that are not wanting to spend a lot of time constructing a home base, the game even offers pre-built homes where all you have to do is collect the materials for it and it'll basically build itself. Hell, you can even make your good friend Kelvin do all the work, though I would recommend you give him big jobs as he's kind of slow. However, I would suggest that at some point ditching the pre-built cabins and going at it for yourself, as the creative side of building your own personal cabin is one of the more exciting features that Sons of the Forest have to offer. Though there are things that can be a little frustrating with the build process. First off, I highly recommend that while you're building your home that you turn off the feature that allows structural damage. The reason being is that depending on the location of your fort, you'll find it being attacked constantly by cannibals. For this reason, they'll keep knocking down your wall, and eventually they will start to become a massive bother while you're trying to get work done. The game doesn't really tell you about this feature though, so it's not something that you'll know unless you look into it yourself or explore the custom settings for your game. Speaking of not telling you things, the game doesn't really hold your hand at all, which is both good and bad. I mean, it gives you a handbook that more or less helps you understand how to build specific structures, but it's not the easiest thing to follow. Plus, trying to go through the pages of the handbook to find out how to add a gate to your defensive wall or a lock on your door can be a massive pain in the ass if you don't know where to look. Honestly, it's almost easier to just look it up online when you're trying to figure out how to do something. Finally, due to the limited amount of resources you can move at a time, building a base from scratch can be very time consuming. Straight up, when I built my first base in Sons of the Forest, it literally took me 4 to 5 hours. Granted, there were a lot of features and tricks that took me longer to learn that could have saved me hours of time, but just goes to show you how the game essentially just throws you to the wolves with nothing but a simple guidebook to assist you. Like exploiting your best friend that I mentioned earlier, Kelvin, or even using a sled to transport more logs at a time. Overall though, once I finally started to understand the basics of construction and collecting resources at a faster pace, building a home base in Sons of the Forest was relatively simple and exciting. Unfortunately though, the game doesn't do the greatest job at motivating you to build a fort. As I said earlier, probably the most exciting element of Sons of the Forest is building a shelter that can provide you with all the necessities that you need to assist you with completing the main story of the game. However, I found that if I wanted to, I could easily make a beeline for the story missions without ever building a safe and secure home base. Sure, it definitely made the game a lot more boring, but outside of creating storage space to hold additional resources like medicine, food, and ammo, there wasn't any real need for the time that I spent working on my cabin. Though to be completely fair, I'm not sure how much the developers could have done to motivate the players to build a secure home, so I don't feel right taking any points off for that. All I'll say on the topic is that if you really want to enjoy Sons of the Forest, then don't rush through the game. Enjoy your experience by taking the time to work on building a shelter that has everything that you'll need in one place, even if you probably won't need it. It's still something cool to show off to your friends at the very least. While one half of the gameplay focuses on building your own home base, the other half focuses on survival and combat. As you would have guessed, for a game that's survival first and horror second, collecting resources is the key to beating the game. You'll need ammo to take out some of the big bads, food and water to keep your stamina meter high, and medicine to prevent yourself from dying. And the only way you can find these things is by searching around this massive island. From snow-covered mountains to underground caves, there are plenty of landscapes to explore with tons of resources hidden throughout the game. While water is pretty easy to find, food requires hunting or stockpiling on packaged food items like ramen noodles and energy bars. But let's not forget that this also is a horror game. On this island, you'll come across cannibals and deformed creatures straight out of your nightmares. From demonic babies that'll leap at you like a demented frog to giant blob monsters that block cave entrances, Sons of the Forest has no shortage of enemy types. And as you would expect, you'll find yourself in situations where you'll need to fight versus flight. This is probably where the game does suffer the most though. While the AI for most of the enemies in the game are relatively impressive, as they'll run away if they feel they are in trouble or climb trees to get a better angle to attack you, the combat for the player side feels a bit clunky and unpolished. Aiming feels off when using long-range weapons, and trying to time attacks without taking some sort of damage in return is almost impossible and takes perfect precision to land hits without receiving any hits. Still, the game keeps things pretty simple and fluent, and only a few times did I find myself getting screwed over by a bug or a glitch during combat. Also, the enemies are fantastic at catching me off guard. I can't tell you how many times I would find myself chopping a tree down and then a random cannibal would pop up and scare the living hell out of me. And not to repeat myself, but I can't go over how creative the enemies can get during combat. Sure, the AI isn't perfect, as sometimes you'll find an enemy ramming a wall to get to you when you're actually right next to them. But other times you'll see them strategizing, flanking you, creating ambushes, and even climbing trees to get in a better angle to attack you. Hell, one of my favorite moments is when an enemy realizes that they are alone and at a disadvantage, so instead of fighting, they just take off running. As for the story, I feel like the less I say, the better. I'll put it this way, Jack crash lands on an isolated island while researching a famous missing family, the Puffins. On the island, he meets other characters along the way and learns more about the secrets of the island. And the direction that the game takes, while I don't agree with some choices, is one of which I don't think you'll see coming. To progress the story, the game challenges you to explore every nook and cranny. For example, you won't be able to get to the ending of the game without locating a rebreather that'll allow you to breathe underwater, and a zipline gun that'll allow you to cross into areas that can't be reached on foot. Speaking of exploring, Sons of the Forest gives you a few different ways to explore this massive world. While traveling by foot allows us to find necessary resources, there are much faster ways to travel. As I mentioned earlier, you can use your zipline gun to zipline across the beautiful landscape. Or if you're just trying to take in the view, which I highly recommend that you do, you could take a ride on a hand glider to get a gorgeous view of this demonic yet beautiful island. However, my preferred method of travel is of course the golf cart. Strangely enough, they are pretty much indestructible and you only need to keep them charged with a spare car battery. Do that and you'll get around this island quickly and painlessly. Sons of the Forest was a game that I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did. I can't tell you how often I found myself getting sidetracked with discovering new side stories or finding new ways to improve my fort. And it even offers multiplayer, which allows your friends to join you on your server where you guys can build your own safe haven together. Between the insane amount of customization, limited resources that force you to stockpile essentials, a story that keeps you on your toes, and a truly horrifying experience that tackles the feelings of fear and anxiety when we think about what's lurking in the dark, Sons of the Forest is without a doubt a masterpiece in survival horror. And honestly, it's probably my favorite survival game of all time, as it finds a way to appeal to a horror fan like me while still having the core mechanics of a survival game. So for all of those reasons and more, Sons of the Forest gets an 8 out of 10 from me. Considering the amount of time I've spent on this game and the fact that even though I beat the main story, I still can't take my hands off of it, Sons of the Forest is an addictive survival horror game that'll keep you entertained for at least 20 plus hours. Anyway, that's it for today's episode of Nerd Space Games. Have you played Sons of the Forest, and if so, what rating would you give it? Do you agree with my score? Let me know down below. But as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.